Hi, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm here with my good friend Ruben Quintero, and Ruben, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you for inviting me, Luke.
Yeah. So we were obviously just talking for a second ago. So we think it was maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago that we first met, I think is what we were saying.
Yeah, I think 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing just to see after all these years getting to connect again. So, man, this is really special to get to chat with you.
We were little kids running around.
I know, I still feel like a little kid sometime, but then you
Yeah.
look at all the adulting that we have to do and you realize kid life is over.
Yeah.
But so this is sweet, man. This is really, really sweet to do this. So why don't, Ruben, for just a minute, why don't you just share with folks kind of where you come from and where you grew up?
Yeah, I come from Mexico, in a city called Mexicali, which is across the border in California. Uh, I grew up there. I found Jesus there. I became part of a church that was a vineyard church when I was a teenager. So I grew up there. I found the Lord there. I started serving the Lord there, and that's where I met you
Yeah.
several years ago.
So however many years ago that was. So when did you actually come to know Jesus? When, like, age wise, or what season was that for you?
Around 8 years old.
Okay.
So yeah, and thanks to some relatives and some missionaries coming from California to Mexico.
Okay.
They did some outreaches and some medical assistance, and my mother was a pediatrician,
Mm.
so she was invited to help, and then we found the Lord
Yeah.
Jesus there. So it was really
Yeah.
fun for me.
So just for a minute, why don't you tell us a little bit about Mexicali? What was your city like growing up?
Well, it is a city for about 1 million people, so
Mm.
it's not a small city.
It's a larger city. Okay.
It's a large city. Um, there, because it's a border city, there's a lot of contact with the U.S., a lot of industry,
Mm.
uh, also agriculture. That's most of the economic side of the city.
Okay.
And when I was a teenager, I think that the Lord started doing some good things in our city, that a lot of Christian churches are starting to grow, including ours.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was a really good place, like a harvest place
Mm.
for Christians to share the gospel, because
Right.
many people were ready.
Okay.
So that's where I grew up. That's our city. The Vineyard Church there has been there for almost 40 years, I think.
Mm.
Uh, and it has grown and developed very well. They have planted different church in different parts of the
Wow.
city, and in different cities, including us in the
Okay.
U.S.
So then, Ruben, for you, when along the way of like coming to know Jesus, being a part of that local community, growing up, when do you feel like the Spirit began to really give you a vision for like what your life was to be about? How did that process happen?
Well, during my youth, I was part of a great youth group.
Mm.
We had great youth pastors who teach us how to serve Jesus in our community. So, and they actually were missionaries coming from the United States to serve in Mexico. So
Hmm.
I remember one time we said, why we cannot do this in the U.S.? I mean, we always have some people coming from the U.S. to serve in Mexico and
Right.
do some short mission trips. And we said, well, why we cannot do this in the U.S.? Because what you do, it's what we can do. We can do all of those things. So
Yeah.
they said, yeah. So back in 1997, that was my first missionary trip, kind of,
Okay.
to the U.S., which was really strange. I
Yeah.
mean, we were in Idaho, and they were asking us, why are you here? I mean, we used to go to
Right.
Mexico.
Yeah, we're used to having Americans coming to Mexico, not the other way around. Okay.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that was part of my training.
Right.
And after that, well, I was going to college. I finished my career, and then I realized that I had a call.
Yeah.
I had a call from God to serve the Lord. So I started serving the Lord in my city, in my hometown.
Okay.
I became a full-time ministry there.
Mm.
I am a public accountant. So I started working in my church in Mexicali, doing the the account
Right.
activities. But being in a church, I got involved in different things, in evangelism, in men's ministry,
Okay.
conferences, Bible school,
Right.
everything except women's ministry.
Okay. Well, I guess it would make sense on some
Yeah.
level. Yeah.
So that's when I was there. That's when I felt, well, in those years I got married, and we talk about, well, you know what, to my wife Vanessa, uh, I think I'm called to serve the Lord.
Right.
And she was with me that side, so we both felt that we were called to do that.
Mm.
So that's what we did for 9 years there in Mexicali. Well, at least myself, I
Okay.
did full ministry there. So before coming to the U.S. to
Right.
plant the church, but that's during my work there. Starting as a young man and then working in the church. That's
Right.
where I felt that I had a call
Right.
to serve the Lord.
So then let me ask you this, Ruben. Obviously, one of the things I've always been fascinated by your story and have loved to kind of hear what the Lord's been doing with you and Vanessa over the years is obviously, like you said, we're used to having, Western missionaries, predominantly like from America, come down into Mexico, right? Which is a lot of what you and I talked about over the years, the good and the harmful that can come from that, right? All included. But obviously now you and Vanessa are doing what we're not used to seeing, where you actually felt like the Spirit of God called you across the border north to plant in America. So describe what the vision was in the beginning. Like what did God give you and Vanessa to say, hey, we're going to step across the border the other direction, at least in what we're used to. So how did that process come? What was the vision that began to birth in you two?
Well, actually, it didn't come from us. It didn't. It came from a partnership between one Southern California Vineyard Church
Okay.
and our local church in Mexicali.
Oh,
They,
okay.
they they wanted to do a partner to plant La Viña Church, or a Vineyard Church, in El Centro, which is a predominant Hispanic place.
Okay.
So that's where the vision came from.
Okay.
Uh, well, because I was part of the Mexicali church and always involved with people coming from the U.S., like you and other churches coming
Yeah.
to Mexicali to serve. Well, they said, what if you plant a church? And first I was like, no.
Right.
No. So I had other plans.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting to come to the U.S.
Yeah.
But after some prayer
Right.
and asking God what He wants me to do, then
Right.
I found out that He wanted me to come, or wanted
Yeah.
us, my family, and several people from our Mexicali church to come.
Okay.
So first, I said, the vision didn't come from us, but after that, I truly embraced the vision
Right.
of
Right.
being a vineyard church in a small town or a small city in the U.S. With a lot of Mexican people, which I am a Mexican, of course, with a lot of Mexican people that need to
Right.
have a church like the Vineyard,
Right.
in their home, in
Right.
their community. So we started with a group of 12 people.
Okay.
So it was a very good beginning. 12 people that were already living in the U.S. but attending the church in Mexicali.
Oh, so they were just coming. So it's that close that they were just coming across the border anyway.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So we just had to cross the border to live here
Okay.
and to find a new way of living, of course. But I think the vision for us at the very beginning was, okay, how to build a community that could embody, the Hispanic or the
Hmm.
Mexican uh, culture, but to become a church that really loves Jesus, that
Right.
really loves the community. So that was the first thing that we did.
Okay.
So to come and start with small groups and to gather together
Right.
as a new church. So I didn't know what God was uh, had in store for us, because I would say that 10 years ago, when that all started, my vision was just for the community of El Centro. But as I have been living here in California, I realized, okay, this is way more than I thought
Yeah.
about the Hispanics living in the U.S.
Wow. Okay. So, because I definitely want to get to that part in a minute. Let me ask you this question, because it's a question I know you and I talked about years ago, and it's just on the language that you're using for those that are listening. Ruben, how would you describe from your upbringing and where you're at now, Mexican citizen now living in America? How would you describe the difference between the terms Hispanic and Latino or Latina? I've noticed over the years I get really different answers, right, from all of my friends of
Yeah.
mine. And so I'm just curious, like, what's your take on those terms? How do you see?
Well, I I know the difference, and I mean I could be technically correct
Okay.
if I want. Maybe if I do, written formal uh, thing, so I would use the technical or the right term.
Okay.
But I use them uh, the same way.
So interchangeably, you can use either one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But well, Hispanic and Latino are different actually. Hispanic is for people that could come from Spain and the Spanish speaking countries.
So any Spanish speaking country.
Yes, and
Okay.
Latino it's from Latin America, which include the Brazilian, which they
Okay.
don't they don't speak Spanish,
Right.
but they don't include Spain.
Okay. So Hispanic would then predominantly be connected to the language of Spanish, if I'm hearing you correctly. And
Yes,
Latino or Latina would be more of a geographic term.
exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because that's really helpful. I mean, just on a practical level, because part of why I was excited to talk with you, Ruben, is as we've engaged in these conversations over the years, being friends, a lot of those cultural lines or those questions can be hard to ask. Like sometimes it can be even, is it offensive to ask that? So I appreciate you just sharing, because I think sometimes if we don't have friends that love us and can know our hearts, it sometimes can be hard to even ask the questions that we wonder. So as a white male from Southern California, those two terms are, I may not know the answer to those. So let me ask you this, Ruben, for you and Vanessa, as you and your community have now been in El Centro for a number of years,
Yes.
what's the experience been like church planting across the border, in a sense? I would say the other direction, but that's probably even pejorative because I'm assuming my direction's correct. But what's it been like planting a church in America for you guys?
Well, it's been a journey. It's been a wild journey.
I bet, man.
Yeah, because even though we are like 30 or 40 minutes from our previous home,
Right.
it's a total different culture.
I bet.
So it's been a journey with a lot of good things,
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of also disappointing things. How's been to us? Well, we did bilingual church, trying to include both generations of people, especially Hispanics,
Okay.
meaning first generations, that the ones that are immigrants to the U.S. and
Okay.
their predominant language is Spanish, and the second generation, which is the generation that has born and grow uh, here in the U.S.
Okay.
and their primary language is English.
Oh,
So
okay.
we made an effort to include both uh, generations, and that's been, kind of that's been successful. In that sense, we can have from both generations in our church, but we also try to include people from different uh, race
Okay.
with our language, and that's been terribly difficult.
Wow. What's been difficult about? So you're saying Spanish speaking folks, but not Hispanic from different maybe if different ethnicities. Is that what you're describing?
No, no, I mean, because we did uh, bilingual services,
Okay.
we we try to include, white people, African American,
Oh, I see. Okay.
from different races, but
Right.
that's been hard. I mean,
Oh,
we
okay.
haven't been able to do that. I mean, we have some visitors every once in a while, and
Right.
they can enjoy one of our services, but not to be part of the
Mm.
church.
Right.
That's been something that has not been possible. So I realized when I came after a few months, I realized that all the different cultures or
Mm-hmm.
races are split in different churches. I mean, there's,
Okay.
the Korean church, the
Right.
African American church, or the church that is predominant white church.
Right.
So uh, that's that's been the difficult part of being
Right.
here. So actually, uh, that could be like, I don't know how to say this, but that could be part of the way of the community lives. I mean,
Mm. So if I'm hearing you right, so are you saying if a community is already living divided, right? Like then the church, in a sense, people are just used to the church being divided.
oh yeah,
Is that what you're
oh
saying? Okay.
yes, oh yeah.
Okay.
And I
So
mean,
yeah.
and I mean, not in a sense that we cannot, do something together. I mean, we do some events
Right.
together. I have a lot of good friends from different backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but in general, it's difficult. There are just a few churches that can do both things,
Okay.
uh, but that's one of the difficulties.
Yeah.
uh, because we are culturally different. I
Right.
mean, I realized, I remember several years ago, there was a lady that was very excited that there was a vineyard church in our hometown. She came from a Midwest state
Okay.
to live here, and she was looking for a vineyard church. And when she went to our church, she was like shocked
Oh wow.
because
Okay.
because it was so different. I guess
Yeah.
because after that, I mean, she disappeared, and she
Wow.
didn't even answer to my emails later.
Wow.
But I mean, what I could see from her is like, okay, this is so different
Right.
culturally.
Yeah, it was just too much of a cultural gap. She just couldn't
Yeah,
cross it.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
But for us, I mean, there's a lot of good things about what
Mm-hmm.
we have been doing. Uh, to know the community
Right.
that we live here, how uh, close is this community, uh, how people helps each other, how people knows most of the people know each other,
Yeah.
or they are close to someone that they know.
Okay.
So this is a good community where I could spend
Yeah.
my life here. I
Right.
mean, I love this community, and because most of the people living here, and when I say most, it's like 80 to 85% of the people living here is Mexican descendant.
Okay.
So for us as a family and as a church, we have a lot of work,
Right.
and we can engage with this community.
Right.
I can say to you, Luke, that I don't even have to speak English most of the time here.
Yeah, in your city, you could speak Spanish and be totally fine the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, for some people that doesn't speak Spanish, it's hard.
I bet.
I mean, it's hard for them if
Right.
they want to have a job. I mean, not only if they speak English, they need to speak Spanish because
Right.
most of the people speak Spanish.
Right. So let me ask you this, Ruben, like, because this is where I'd be really curious to hear your kind of your thought on it. Not only being Mexican yourself, but just as a pastor, even biblically, when you guys dream about what church is to be. So you mentioned obviously that it's hard for people to cross those cultural lines, which I've experienced all around the world has been the case. But what do you think then, even though you haven't yet seen it, when you think biblically of like what God desires for his people, what do you dream of for the community? Do you like when you think of your church there in El Centro, the community you're a part of, would ideally it be a place where both Spanish and English are spoken together? Would it be predominantly like where if most people are Spanish speaking, it's going to be predominantly a Spanish speaking congregation? I would just love to hear what's the ideal. What do you think you're going? What are we to go after? Maybe.
Well, I guess the ideal it has to be a both languages.
Okay.
Because even though many people are from Mexico, we have to learn and speak English here. You know, to do business, to do school, to do whatever we need. So this is the language that we have as Hispanics. We need to learn. And we need to be, I don't know how to say this, but to be part of this culture and to be part of this community. We decided to come from another country, and this is the official language, and actually English is the universal language.
Okay.
So I think our responsibility is to learn,
right,
according to the place that we are going to engage with, and that's I remember biblically the word from Jeremiah to those people that were on exile in Babylon. I read the Bible in Spanish.
Right. Well, how about this? In all honesty, why don't you, just so you can connect to it, you want to just like talk or say that verse in Spanish, and then maybe we can talk through it.
Okay, it is: construyan sus casas, planten sus viñas allá, cásense allá, tengan hijos, tengan sus nietos, vivan en la comunidad que yo los envío y vivan en paz allá. So that's kind of the message from the Lord. It's build houses, have family, have children there, and have peace and speak peace in that community.
Okay.
So that's kind of the message that I think it's for all of us who are immigrant coming to the U.S. that we have to, build houses, live here, have families, have children, and work hard. That's part of our call.
Okay.
From God to do here in the United States. So that's what I think that we need to learn English and come to this culture. So my ideal would be something like bilingual in our community, speaking by community, because it's there's a lot of Spanish speakers. So the idea would be bilingual, but also inclusive of different races. In leadership and serving the Lord together, which is actually the hardest thing. There are some churches that have been doing this, but they work predominantly in English.
Okay.
Because they focus more on the second generation of Hispanics.
Oh, who are already English speakers.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they are doing a good job.
Right.
But the first generation is
Right.
that's the one that is set aside. So for me, the idea would be like uh, to have a multi-ethnic uh,
Mm.
church here. That could biblically be the vision,
Right.
according to Galatians. No Greek, no Jew, no man or woman.
Right.
Uh, I'm sorry. When I think in the Bible,
Yeah.
I think in Spanish.
Yeah. No, it's all good, man. So you're talking about essentially that passage in Galatians where Paul is talking about we're no longer divided by those certain things. We're
Exactly.
not no longer not a man or woman. They just don't divide us any longer.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So let me ask you this, Ruben. So maybe on a more general level, because part of what I was hoping to be able to let our listeners just hear as part of the conversation, what would you say to local churches, right? Because obviously living in America, my city is about half Spanish speaking, right, where I live, right here in Riverside. And so when you think of both the immigrant community and then the non-immigrant community, like us who are citizens of this country, let me ask you a twofold question. We'll start with the first one. I would love, like, even the church that we're a part of, right? If we've got immigrants in our local community, which we have many in our city, what is the difference, or maybe the I don't know if challenge is the right word, maybe the tensions between, like you said, first generation immigrants, maybe those that first, let's say from Mexico, first moved here from Mexico, predominantly Spanish speaking, and then the second generation, like you said, the kids that were born in America that maybe know Spanish, but maybe English is their predominant language, or either way they're bilingual. If we've got folks in our community and we really want to love our neighborhoods well, help us understand the differences between the two generations. Do they have different needs? Are there different ways to serve both first generation and second generation immigrants?
Well, they have different needs, yeah, and they have tension. Uh, well, the first need for the immigrants is the language barrier. I
Mm.
mean, that's something that it's always there. It is always there. So, but after that, I would say that for the first generation, it's always hard to live in a different culture.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And that's a tension between parents and children, because children are now growing in this culture, so for them it's very easy to connect to different people,
Okay.
but not for the first generation Hispanics,
Okay.
which are more uh, they miss their own culture.
Right.
They miss their own way of living back in their countries.
Okay.
So that's a tension between even parents and children.
I bet.
And the same is in the church. I mean, if you have two generations, the first generation tries to do the things according to their own culture.
Mm-hmm.
And the second generation, it's a totally different way of thinking and
Right.
way of doing the things for in church.
Right.
So that could be a great tension.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers you.
No, yeah, that's great, because one of the reasons I was curious to ask is, even on another level, when I worked at our school, we had a lot of students from China, and it wouldn't necessarily be the same as an immigrant conversation. But one of the things I noticed is in getting to know the students that were, even though they didn't live in America, they're very Western in their thinking. They've just grown up with the internet. Their minds think very much Western. However, when I got to know their parents, I noticed really right off the bat, there was a massive tension between parents who were thinking one way and yet they're watching their kids grow up. And I remember thinking, that's got to be incredibly scary, almost not knowing the mindset of your own kids. So let me ask you this, pastorally, what's it like pastoring a flock where you've got first generation and second generation? What are the challenges there to shepherd a flock that's, like you said, maybe beginning to think very differently even within family units?
Yeah, well, that's a really good challenge that we have, and my approach is doing it through the Bible, because if I want to build a kingdom mentality, a kingdom, and a Bible way of doing things. I mean, I can engage with both cultures. I
Okay.
understand the culture of an immigrant because I am an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I'm trying to understand the culture of the newer generation.
Okay.
But the way that I try to connect both, it's through the Bible actually.
Mm.
It's through God's principles. It's through Jesus' life.
Yeah.
It's through uh, well, Jesus' life, Jesus' teachings, Jesus' way of living.
Right.
Because
Right.
uh, he was in a good sense a revolutionary of
Yeah.
of his own culture.
Right.
So I know that for us, we don't have to set in one culture or another,
Right.
but in God's word,
Yeah.
kingdom principles.
Okay.
So even though that I I struggle sometimes
Right.
with these tensions between both generations,
Right.
I know that the Bible leads us.
Right. Yeah, so it makes sense, right? Because, I was talking with some friends the other day, and there really is, as we're crossing these cultural lines, obviously those of us that are following Jesus, our citizenship in heaven is our first citizenship, right? It's not Mexican first or American first. We're kingdom citizens. So that's why I appreciate you sharing some of this, because those are obviously the hardest lines to cross, right? If you come at the conversation Mexican first, kingdom citizen second, I come at the conversation American first, kingdom citizen second, obviously we've got some massive problems. We probably can't even engage in a conversation. So let me ask you this, back to the generation question, even on a personal level for you and Vanessa. Now, are your kids, I'm trying to think time frame wise, were your kids born in Mexico and moved here? Were your kids born in America? What's it like, even like you said, you and Vanessa moving here as immigrants, but now raising kids in American culture? How's that been for you guys so far?
Well, they were born in Mexico,
Okay.
and they have grown here. My oldest was 5 when we got here,
Okay.
so the youngest was 1 year old.
Got it.
So how's been our experience? So far so good.
Okay.
And trying to, as I said, teach them Bible first.
Right.
I mean, I love the way they have learned the Bible since they were very, very small. I mean, spending time to read the Bible with them every night
Right.
has been, I mean, their first, I would say their first culture.
Okay.
So far so good. I know we have some fights to fight.
Yeah.
In the near future, maybe. I have what I can. I now I have one teenager or 2 teenagers maybe, but so far so good.
Yeah. Now, how's it been for, excuse me, for you and Vanessa? Is it ever scary thinking about your kids growing up in America? Do you feel like would ever lose like their culture being Mexican? Is that something that's ever there, or is that, I don't know, maybe that's not attention. I was just curious if that's ever there for you guys. I know it is for some parents, but
yeah, for some parents it is, not for us.
Not for you guys. Okay.
No, not for us. We were thinking when we came here, we were thinking, okay, that's where the Lord is sending us.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Our children are gonna grow with us,
right?
And we're gonna, we are responsible of their education,
right?
So any place, it would be challenging,
right?
I mean,
right.
Mexico has different challenges than here,
right?
But any place would be challenging. So we have not been afraid
right.
of parenting.
Okay. Yeah, here. So let me ask you this, Ruben, on a real local level for whoever's listening, right? Maybe on two audiences. One would be like a family like ours, Kirsten and I living in our neighborhood, just working jobs, living in a city that we have Mexican neighbors, right? We have neighbors that speak Spanish as their first language. So maybe that's one group. The second group maybe is to church leaders that are in a city like ours who long to reach the Hispanic community in our neighborhood. Maybe if you speak to a family like ours first, how would you encourage us, Ruben? We're English speakers, right? We speak English. If we've got neighbors or friends that we work with that maybe are bilingual, but maybe only speak Spanish, I know that it can be really scary to know how to even love our neighbor or maybe how to cross the line. So how would you encourage just folks living in a city like ours to really learn to love our Hispanic neighbors well? What would you say to us?
Okay, well, first of all, I wouldn't separate the leadership from a church and being a family.
Oh, great. Okay.
And having a neighbor, Hispanic neighbor. I would say you are Luke, you are the Jacksons, and you can engage with Hispanics where you are.
Right. Okay.
Just as you are. So that would say that was the first thing that I would say. Then I know what is to be afraid of, being like that. But I would say, okay, make a brave move and invite someone to eat, or be with people that are, Hispanics, and try to engage in some conversations. And if you engage in those conversations, you will end up eating their food. And
okay.
That would be a major step.
Okay.
In your relationship. Why do I say this? Well, I have faced, both things. Like the fear of being, if the fear of not being in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
People that live very different than me.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just, for example, for me that I speak Spanish most of the time, being in a place where there's a group of a social group, could be like a sport team or a job where they are all always speaking English, could be hard for me.
I bet, absolutely.
Yeah, but I try to engage in those conversations.
Right.
I end up, being welcome. And it's the same when I try to approach different people that speak Spanish but are not my, in my circle of friends or social setting. But I try to, be included or being welcome. When I got to the point that I am invited to eat, I made it. So
what is it about food? I mean, like, what is it about that moment, like you said, that crosses that line better than a million conversations maybe even could? What is it about that?
Well, food is universal. If you eat, people's food, it's I don't know how to explain that, but
is it like honoring, like honoring your world?
Yeah, it could be. I just can't think of Jesus saying he's the bread of life. And bread, every culture eats bread.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess so, huh?
There's no culture that doesn't eat bread. So food is like that. It's a connecting. It's connecting people more than just a superficial relationship. It helps you go to a deeper level.
Okay.
So if you can invite someone to eat, if you cook, actually it's a lot better to have a closer or deeper relationship with people. So in this cross-cultural actions
Mm-hmm.
or steps that we want to move for,
Yeah.
we need to include food and in the
Right.
relationship.
Let me ask you this, Ruben. What do you think it is that keeps us from? Because what I just heard you say was, in a sense, seemed very simple, right? Literally inviting people to a meal, which doesn't seem like rocket science. You don't need a church program or budget to do that, right? So, what do you think it is, though? If it is that simple, what do you think keeps us from that moment? What do you think keeps us from simply being an invitational people? Are there obstacles you see to why we don't take on those moments more often?
Uh, well, I don't know why, but it could be like uh, we just it could be like the same thing. We are just afraid of
Okay.
not being liked.
Yeah.
I mean, what if this is not the way they eat? What if they don't like our food? What
Right.
if they do different the
Mm.
things different than us?
Right.
And yeah, it may be, the food may taste different,
Right.
or the way we eat is different. Even the time that we eat, it
Right.
could be different.
Okay.
But that shouldn't make us
Like, it shouldn't scare us from not doing it.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, all right, let me ask this, Ruben, on that level, because obviously, one of the things that Kirsten and I are passionate about in our organization, Radical Middle Ministries, this is a lot of what we want to equip people to think in certain ways biblically. Obviously, you've been in America long enough. You probably obviously experienced this before you even moved to America. But when we talk about immigrants in our culture, most people will first go to politics, and consequently, you now have a stance on it, right? And that stance politically will dictate the conversation. However, like you said, biblically, we know our call as believers and God's heart for immigrants is not a gray matter, right? Jesus calling us to love immigrants is so central to who he is, it's not even a conversation. So let me ask you this on this level to help us think through this in a biblical way, in a way that doesn't first take us to politics and thus we can't even engage. How would you encourage communities to love the immigrants in their community, right? So how would you encourage a local church who, like our city, has a city of immigrants from all over the world? How would you encourage a local church to love the immigrants in their city, to really serve that community well? Are there certain things that come to mind that would be maybe helpful for us to think through?
Yeah. Well, let me clarify something.
Okay.
And then I will answer your question.
Great.
Speaking of most Hispanics, well, maybe I would speak only for Mexican, which is the largest Hispanic community in the U.S.
Okay.
But speaking from this part, when you talk about immigration or any other topic, we are not politics is not our first thought.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
People who immigrate here are more interested in many other things before politics.
Okay.
Actually, and this is something that I can answer your question. There are millions of people living in the U.S. That are permanent resident, that are not U.S. citizens, and they can be U.S. citizens if they would, do the effort to become U.S. citizens. Why they don't? Because they are not interested in politics. They are not interested in voting. They are not interested in that. So, and one of the ways that we can reach that community is and being welcoming.
Yeah.
Immigrants. It's why you don't become a U.S. citizen. Why you don't become a permanent resident? We can help you. If we offer like immigration seminars, classes, support, that would be very helpful. We just had a partnership with one church here in locally, and we ask one, uh, citizen, uh, how can I say this, uh, a teacher, a college teacher,
Okay.
who also is a professional with citizenship, and we ask him to do citizenship classes in our church,
Oh, interesting.
for free, and we have a lot of people coming by,
Mm.
and then we try to help them to become more English fluent. So
Okay.
the ESL, English as Second Language, class, it's very helpful. So we want to help immigrants
Mm-hmm.
to become part of us. We can do some things like that, like
Okay.
ESL classes, immigration classes. For sure, you will have people there, people that are looking for a better opportunity in life,
Okay.
in work. Because speaking on the Hispanics, most of Hispanics are blue collar people.
Okay.
Uh, so they want better opportunities. So they will be often looking for this kind of help.
Okay.
So that's a way for a church or for a ministry to be welcoming to people,
Okay.
to immigrants, doing
Yeah.
ESL and immigration classes.
Okay.
Also, of course, the partnering with a food bank, a local food bank, to distribute food, or if you are able to have your own food shelf at your church,
Okay.
that will be very helpful to, to engage with the Hispanic community.
Yeah.
I have heard many stories about churches doing food shelves, and most of the people that are there are immigrants,
Okay.
that are looking for food. So
Right.
that's a good place to start connections, to start friendships, to
Right.
know people.
Okay. No, that's great, Ruben. Man, this is so rich. Let me ask you one last question, maybe to kind of wrap up our time. I'm thinking you and I will have further conversations because there's a million questions now floating around in my mind. But if you were to say, Ruben, just as a pastor now, speaking to the church in America, which is obviously quite diverse, quite large, right? That's obviously a very general term. What do you feel like God's heart is for the church in America, just where we are today? Like, if there was a word or a couple challenges or words of encouragement that you think pastorally, whether again it's churches like yours, maybe churches that we're a part of, all different ethnicities, languages across the country, what do you feel like the Lord might want to say to the church in America with where we are today in 2020? What do you think the word would be?
That's a very good question, Luke. Uh, I would say we need to become the church that reads the Bible and practice the Bible, that believes in the Holy Spirit, that preaches the gospel, that we are empowered by the Holy Spirit to do the ministry that God is asking us to do. So keep focusing on the Bible. Culture is always shifting. Culture is always shifting, and generations are coming and going, but the Bible remains forever. So keep your mind, your soul attached to the Word of God.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, Ruben, thank you. This has been just incredibly rich, man, and I look forward to more conversations. I think we'll have more as we go. So thank you, man. I really do appreciate this.
Thank you, Luke. Look, it's my pleasure to talk to you, to see you for all these years, and to talk about these things that I really love. I love the church in America.
Yeah.
I really love the church in America. I really feel that God has a great call for us, for this generation, this diverse generation that is now in the U.S. God has brought us the nations. So it's a great challenge for the church in this century. So we are going to do it. I know we are going to do it, and we are going to be sending people to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, may it be so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Well, everybody, until the next conversation, grace and peace.